Hi, hello English readers, and welcome to Lydie's Book Club August Live Read Along. I'm Lydie and I'm an English teacher in France. I'm also the founder of Lydie's Book Club, in which I host live readings of adaptations of classics of English literature and contemporary novels. Each month, we read and explore a different book for all levels of English. And once a week, I meet the members of the book club in a live workshop via Zoom to discuss the chapters of the book that we're currently reading. In this book club, I also tend to prioritize books that are written by women. And this month, we are reading the contemporary novel Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. This is her first book, and we are reading it. We are reading it in its integral text. So for that, you need to have a minimum of C1 plus level. So you need to have a quite solid level of English. If you would like to know more about the novel and Julia Armfield's work, I invite you to listen to the podcast episode 23, an introduction to Julia Armfield and Our Wives Under the Sea, which is available on this YouTube channel and also on the Spotify podcast, Read in English. And that is the name of the podcast of Lydie's Book Club. I find that it's very useful and very user-friendly to listen to readings or any podcast via Spotify. So it's very useful. So that's why I make sure that it's also on this platform, that the live readings are available on this platform. Today is our fifth live reading session. There are 10 in total. And so today we are going to read pages 75 to 100 of the book, Our Wives Under the Sea. And you can find all the upcoming dates and times on my website by clicking on the link in the description or by checking out the Instagram post on my Instagram account. You can find also these information. And if you follow me, you can also attend the live via Instagram. And you can, if you're not able to attend the live by Instagram, then you can rewatch all the live readings here on this YouTube channel and on Spotify podcast as well. In addition to these 10 live reading sessions, I'm also hosting 3 live workshops based on the novel. So this way, the members of the book club can practice their speaking skills and also share their views on the novel and really create a nice and share their views on books in general and really connect with others. These live workshops are hosted on Zoom, so you have to become a member of the book club to be part of the conversation. And you can find all the upcoming dates of the live workshops by the link as well on my website and also on Instagram. We've done already one live workshop, so there are 2 more coming up. So it's not too late to take part in the live workshop. Hello, Keti. Thank you for joining today. I hope you're well. So I also wanted to inform you, to remind you that you can now purchase the 3-part live workshop on Daisy Jones and the Six, our live reading of July. Also, you have to, we've read the book in its integral text, so you have to have a C1 level minimum to be able to appreciate the novel and understand most of it. If you have any questions or anything, any comments, please leave the comments below this video, or message me by Instagram. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. And once you purchase the live workshops sessions, you will be asked to create a login, which will give you access to private space on my website. And this way you can just watch the videos at your own pace and whenever you want. So it's quite nice for you to have that. This way it will give you a bit of an idea, a glimpse of what it is to be part of Lydie's book club. So if you're not sure about subscribing to this book club and commit to it, then that's a good way as well to be guided in your reading, and also to have an idea of what it's like to be part of Lydie's book club. So that being said, let's get started. I'm going to start with a quick recap of our previous live reading, which was now quite a long time ago, last Friday, and with session 4, and you can find the live session that I uploaded yesterday, because I had a technical issue on Friday, so I couldn't post. I had to re-record the live reading, so you can find the live reading now of session 4. And during this session we read pages 59 to 71. So in this at this point in the novel, we start with Leah's chapter, in which she evokes how she met Matteo, another member of the crew in the mission, and yeah, it tells us a little bit. Well, Leah tells us a little bit more about how she met him at her first job, when the center did not exist yet. So at this point, we learned that the center is has been recently built, and that she's been working for a long time in another research institute. Then we've got Miri talking about the fact that she is falling behind in her work. We've learned this expression with Keti during the live workshop. We discussed a little bit about this expression of the fact that Miri is not really focused on her work. She is tired, and she doesn't do the work that she's meant to do, and she is behind. So she's falling behind in her work. There is a lot of work piling up for her. Remember, she works for different charities as a grant. She writes grants applications. So grants they're like scholarship, or ways for people to apply when they have a project, and this way people, well, the organization offers some money for, I don't know, artists or business people wants to have some help in their project, and she creates basically the application form for this organization and for these charities. And she's got so many emails that she hasn't replied to, and people start to get a little bit angry at her. So that doesn't look good for her in terms of professionalism and yeah, in the fact that you're not doing your job properly as well. And you're her, yeah. So she's not really in the right state of mind, and plus she and her, I mean, Miri and Leah are arguing a lot about the fact that Leah is running the water, she's wasting a lot of water, and Miri is saying, "Oh, I'm not going to pay my half of the water bill this month because it's." She's upset about the fact that she's wasting water, and she wished that Leah would fight back, but instead she doesn't know what to say. She doesn't say much, and Mary is quite frustrated about Leah's no reaction to the argument. So yeah, Miri is a bit frustrated by this situation. And then we've got this beautiful story that Miri is telling us about Leah when she was working in this aquarium when she was 18, and she really bonded with this giant Pacific octopus called Pamela, and the fact that it's a story that Leah told her, and now Miri is telling us, the readers, that it was during a date when Leah was dating this girl, and she was showing her the aquarium, and when she wanted to show her Pamela, when she opened the tank, Pamela was dead, and that's something that really hurt Leah. She was very close to this animal, and she was really sad about the death of this octopus. And that also tells us about how we treat animals, and whether marine creatures and wild animals should be in zoos or in aquariums on display, and not being in their natural habitats. So it shows I take it this way personally, that it's perhaps a critique of the business around marine animals, and as a whole of animal treatments in zoos and in these places that use rarity of animals to make money and to entertain people. So yeah, that makes us reflect on the purpose of these places, and how um, sad these animals are. Yeah, I mean, and in another hand, it doesn't really. I mean, compared to the amount of animals that are exploited in the fishing trade and everything, maybe it's relatively short amount of animals that are taken into zoos and who are dying, but in these places, but still, I guess it's how it's a reflection of our relation with animals and nature as humans, I would say. Yeah. Let me what you think. Let me know. Sorry. Let me know what you think in the comments, and how you perceive this passage. I'd be quite interested to have your input. So yeah, there is this very poignant passage of Pamela the octopus and Miri imagining herself another version of this episode in Leah's life, in which she would be the girlfriend. I mean, Miri would be the girlfriend at 18, and Pamela wouldn't be dead, and they would have had this beautiful moment together. But this didn't happen because at 18 they didn't know each other. I mean, Leah and Miri didn't know each other, and yet Leah and Miri hadn't yet kissed a girl, apparently. So probably she didn't know that she liked girls at this point. So yeah, that was a very sad and heartbreaking passage here. And finally, we ended this zone, the Twilight Zone, the second zone that this book is divided in. So remember, there are 5 zones, and we're going to start the midnight zone today. And these are the different layers. As Keti looked during our workshop, we discussed about this meaning of the different zone, and it is the different layers that the ocean is divided in, the different layers of the ocean. So yeah, if you want to dig more into knowing the meaning of each zone, then feel free to leave the comment and share what you have found. So we end this Twilight Zone with Leah, well, Miri being woken up by Leah, who is soaking wet in her vomit, more or less, and convulsing and shaking, as it seemed like she had a nightmare or something. She was screaming, which made Miri wake up. And when Miri managed to wake her up, or bring her consciousness back, Leah didn't seem to recognize Miri. So it's quite intriguing here. And it feels like Miri is in this, I don't know, unstable state, and as if she drowned in her bed, and it's, I don't know, full of water. Remember that Leah is not really eating properly. She doesn't eat much. And when she eats, it's very salty. And and she drinks a lot of water. I mean, yeah, and it's a little bit strange how she yeah, how she behaves, and the fact that she doesn't eat much, or kind of weird stuff. So yeah, so that's the end of this twilight zone, and now we're entering in the midnight zone, and it starts with Leah's chapter. Okay, let's start. Seafloor, full dark. About half an hour after the craft came to its miraculous gentle stop, Matteo started vainly trying to send distress signals again, though as Jelka pointed out, there was little to no sense in doing this, since we were on board the only vessel capable of diving to such a depth. What are they going to do? She said, her impulse to pray apparently cut short by irritation. Send a search party 10,000 feet, then throw a rope ladder the rest of the way? I remember her then glaring at us, as thin as I have ever known a person to be, and still be able to move around. None of us commented on the strangeness of the situation, on the way a routine research dive had so quickly turned into this. As before, during the fall, the impulse to question felt curiously flattened, the notion of how this had happened somehow beside the point. I smelled burning flesh again, just for a moment. Oh, sorry, I'm just quickly going to close this door. Yeah, sorry. Here we go. So I'm going to start here. None of us commented on the strangeness of the situation, on the way a routine research dive had so quickly turned into this. As before, during the fall, the impulse to question felt curiously flattened, the notion of how this had happened somehow beside the point. I smelled burning flesh again, just for a moment. Burning flesh is skin, you know. Okay, so she's smelling the burning of a body or something living. Just for a moment, and thought about saying something, then distracted myself with thoughts of things I had left above the sea level, of polystyrenes, cups and orange juice and pizza, of the sound of our neighbor's television on the way, our neighbor's television, and the way Miri bit at the skin of her lip so often that kissing tasted bloody. So here is the first time that Leah is mentioning Miri in her narrative part here. So interesting. Metallic zip of a licked battery. And the way Miri bit at the skin of her lip so often that kissing tasted bloody. Metallic zip of a licked battery. Sunken thought. I imagine her saying, and turned my face towards the windows. Without lights, the water was blind around us, and holding torches to the glass resulted in little but our own faces reflected back. Ghost forms in deep water. 6 eyes peering in from without. There are 5 main layers to the ocean. Oh, here, at least if you go by scientific designation. The first is or pardon me for the pronunciation, if I'm not sure about how to pronounce those ones. Those are words that I've never seen before. So epipelagic. Sorry. The first is the epipelagic or sunlight zone, also known as the photic zone. Okay. Which covers the distance between the surface and approximately 600 feet beneath. Here, there is only minimal pressure, coral reefs, color and pleasure diverse, the option to hold your breath and jump. After that come the mesopelagic or twilight zone, reaching an approximate 3,000 feet, at which point sunlight may still penetrate, though beyond this drop comes the bathypelagic or midnight zone. And from here on, you're down in the dark. I don't know if you've watched films about the ocean or documentaries, and you can clearly see that the deeper you go, the darker it is in the ocean. That's quite scary. The midnight zone. And from here, you're down in the dark. At around 13,000 feet and below, you pass through the abyssopelagic or abyssal zone, an area whose name roughly translates to no bottom. No light here, of course, and temperatures a little above freezing, though you will still encounter life of a fashion at this depth. These comes down this far and further, though they seldom come with blood and bones included. Once you reach depth of 13,000 feet, everything has a strange name, but rarely a backbone. Vampire squid and zombie worms, cosmic jellyfish, tripod fish, and faceless cusks, and pelican eels, creatures that live this deep are frequently solitary and only frequently seen. There are big things down here, old things, and certainly more of them than we know about. Almost every piloted dive to these depths has uncovered something new. Beyond this point, there is a final layer, that the furthest depth of the sea are fragmented and interspersed amongst trenches formed by tectonic subduction, where the plates of the earth converged and the older, denser plate is pushed down beneath the lighter, creating fissures and places for things to drop deep. This layer is known as the adalpelagic or the adal zone, a name which speaks for itself, lying between roughly 19 and 36,000 feet. Much of this layer of the water is unexplored, which is not to say uninhabited. It was difficult to tell exactly how far we had fallen without the system online to give us a read. It would, I suppose, have been entirely possible to hit the seabed without falling into one of the trenches, although looking out onto the blackness, I believed almost without question that we had fallen as far as it was possible to go. It was difficult to imagine anywhere deeper than the place we had ended up. Interesting here. So we don't really know up to which zone the vessel ended up. stopping. But it seems like it would have been quite different, quite hard to imagine that you went down to the adult zone, I would say. Okay, Miri now. Leah and my mother never met for a number of reasons. Most conveniently because by the time Leah and I were serious enough for the issue to arise, my mother was already quite ill. Leah was good about this, for the most part, rarely asked and didn't seem to take offense. When I visited my mother at her house before I moved her, I often came away afraid of insane things, spent days afterwards terrified of the ceilings falling or of being bitten of being bitten of something crawling up my legs. And Leah was patient with this, the way I ultimately came to see as central to the whole of her. In the nights directly following my visits, I would fall asleep in often inexplicable panic, and Leah would soothe me, tell me she had me, press her hands into the small of my back. She discovered it was easy to calm me down by repeating words with shapes I found appealing, muted, redolent, and pelt and chicanery, until I fell asleep. On occasion, and typically out of nowhere, I would wonder whether this level of patience would hold out. Should a test ever prove I was likely to develop the same condition as my mother? On occasion, I would look in the mirror and consider the briskly diminishing fact of myself, hold my hands to the sides of my face as if preventing collapse. Would you look after me? I found myself wanting to ask and unable to do so, the request tangling back on itself. Coming out as would you pass the gravy? Would you change the channel? Would you look at this? For a long time it failed to occur to me that I was not in fact the only person this could happen to. I would look into the mirror and imagine that only I could be in any sense finite. Okay, to another space and time. I don't realize until well after the fact that I haven't been expecting to get through to anyone actually able to help me. The phone calls to the center have simply established themselves as routine, akin to hair brushing, to running my finger across my teeth and calling them clean. The morning it works, I'm already planning the rest of the day. Idle pile up of tea and spoons and gummy vitamins, unread emails and posts left unopened, and linens changed, salt hidden, residue scrubbed from the sides of the bath. At the table, 2 plates, the crusts of bread rolls with their insides picked out, a pitcher of day-old water growing a skin. We haven't spoken about the previous night, that the bed in which Leah sleeps has dried, and we haven't spoken about the previous night. Okay, so sorry. So the fact that Leah was screaming and vomiting water and whatever, and lost consciousness. So we haven't spoken about the previous night, that the bed in which Leah sleeps has dried, and her behavior seems largely unaffected. I have Googled and found the results mostly unhelpful. Reasons for vomiting clear liquid. Do you have acute gastroenteritis? Have you drunk too much water? Have you been making yourself sick? Leah is locked in the bathroom, humming something that might be a song I recognize, but almost certainly isn't. I am listening to the sound of the taps. to the sound of her humming and thinking, for whatever reason, of the clutter of my mother's bathroom shelves, the cold cream and jungle formula and the bluegrass perfume that she always kept in its box with a turquoise and cream's Celtic lettering. The space around us is a claw half grasped, holding tight without quite crushing. And I wish, in the idle way, I always wish it these days that I felt more confident in my ability to breathe. I'm staring out of the window when the hold music cuts in mid-chorus and a voice comes online asking me in business-like fashion how it is they can help me today. Automatically, I start to recite the numbers, rank numbers, transfer number, and so on and so on. But the voice interrupts to ensure me they already have all the details they need. I'm sorry if it's been a bit of a process, the voice adds, in a tone that could convey almost any emotion. Getting in touch with us. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry if it's been a bit of a process, the voice adds, in a tone that could convey almost any emotion. Getting in touch with us. The end of the sentence. The upstairs neighbors are playing a soap opera on the television. A woman screaming in a voice that tries and fails to convince that this isn't what she wanted at all. Okay. I remember a time that Leah went away. Not the time, but this time, the mission. But a point long before she was working for the centre, a point at which expeditions were still infrequent. Brief dives off the coast of Scotland, weeks abroad on fishing trawlers, research trips to places I could find on the map. The way I remember it is this: late September, washed down dregs of a liquid summer. The seasons always change more swiftly on the water. The light on the sea autumnal long before the chill has reached the city. And I was far from the city that day, having travelled miles to see Leah off. The afternoon, they left. I watched from the viewing deck along with 3 or 4 of the other wives, one of whom complained of being cold until a staffer from the rig offered her a life jacket in a bid to shut her up. Colder on the water, she said, over and over again. Should have thought of that. Should have brought something warmer. I remembered the slip of the craft across the water, long metal nose and sculpted coning tower, the way it seems to deep and slink eel-like white lights along its pine and finial. I watched it float, not bobbing, seeming less to sit upon the water than to hang within it, half submerged and threatening to sink. I remember turning to the woman on my right and saying I wasn't sure a ship like that could possibly withstand the ocean's weight on top of it, that the crew could all be crushed, that we ought to speak to someone. This woman, I forget whose wife she was, only smiled at me, took my hand, and said that first-timers always felt like this. You expect them to come back looking like Flat Stanley, she said. And I told her I wasn't a first-timer and asked her who Flat Stanley was. And she asked if I'd really never read those books. And in an ensuing conversation, I moved my eyes away from the water long enough to miss the ship going down. By the time I looked back, there was nothing. Bob of gulls upon an undisturbed surface, gentle sense of something pulling in my wrists, as if my heart had momentarily stopped. Now, the thing is, from everything I know and everything I have otherwise experienced, it seems unlikely that the ship could have gone down that quickly, and certainly not with such minimal disturbance on the top. But even so, this is what I remember. And short of getting in contact with the other wives on board the viewing deck that day, none of those names I even recall. There is no way of checking the scenario of accuracy. What I remember then becomes what happened. We are leaving like the summer from the ocean, not by degrees, but all at once. The last time she went away was different. For one thing, I wasn't there. After the center threw their going away party, remember they did a little going away party before the whole crew left. So after the center threw their going away party, I went home and Leah didn't. And that night I dreamed auroral colors and woke at 3 to a white rubbernecking moon at the window, and which I chose not to find unsettling. 3 weeks is not a long time. One can wait 3 weeks for a parcel and think very little of it. For a while, I tight-roped a careful normality, considering calling friends and asking them to entertain me, did my work and listened to the neighbors' television, and broadly speaking, didn't think of much at all. When the 3 weeks had passed and Leah did not return, the center called to tell me that there had been a delay. How exactly can a submarine be delayed? I asked. Imagined underwater toll roads, found myself on the precipice of a laugh. It was nothing, so they said, to be concerned about. Provisionally, the vessel was stopped for several months. The oxygen would continue to replenish. But it won't be several months, will it? The voice in the end of the line assured me it would not. I went to the movies alone on a Tuesday lunchtime, lined my wallet with contraband sweets, which I ate in the dark, unscrewed each from its polythene wrap with a noise that would have been thrilling and antisocial had there been anyone there to annoy. Afterwards, I moved through the city the way one might in bad weather. Though the day was clear and my head bent down against nothing, there was, as of course I now know, something terribly wrong already. But I question how much I really understood them. What significance I can attach to a bad day, to an upset stomach. In general, I wasn't sure of how to behave. The center called again to tell me there was nothing to worry about, and tried to ask questions. And I tried to ask questions, but found it difficult to argue with the brightness of the sound of the voice on the line. Okay, thank you, I remember I said, somehow unable to summon the bad manners required to protest against such meaningless reassurance. I really am grateful you called. I remember, anxious not to offend the person whose updates were broadly unhelpful, but who might, I imagined, quite easily stop calling if I said the wrong thing. At the 2-month mark, I wondered briefly about joining a support group for military wives, and dismissed this. consulted notice boards in the newsagent, but found only choirs and Addicts Anonymous, a phone line for smokers, and a book group for women with GAD. I lifted up flyers that had been pinned in such a way as to obscure older ones. Imagined pulling a card from some hidden place and holding it up to the light. Wife under the sea. Here's the number to call. In the end, I took a flyer advertising cleaning services at a knockdown rate and left the newsagent without buying anything. So she's imagining that there would be an advertisement for a support group for wives who of who their partners are on the mission under the sea. So that explains our wives under the sea. The title of this book. This is not to say that I didn't keep busy. I was still working then, of a fashion, still keeping up with Carmen, who I apprised only a little of what was going on. I had been alone before, after all. I knew the ways in which time knit together, the hours of television and cans of soup and sleeves of dates it takes to make up a day. Leah's friends would call at irregular intervals, most frequently Toby and Sam, both of whom had become my friends over the intervening years since our first dinner party. We talked fairly often, and I filled my days this way. Texted Sam about the books she was reading, kept up a string of messages with Toby over the programs playing on the neighbor's television, a topic that never ceased to fascinate him. Do you think, he had said to me once, they're running some sort of illegal operation up there and the television is just to drown out the noise? For whatever reason, I was vague about the situation. Told Carmen and Sam that Leah was delayed, but that it was nothing to worry about, that she'd be back in a month at most. So, okay, Sam said. Did you think that you'd like to come eat with us this evening? I told her I'd love to, really, but that a friend was away for the weekend and had promised to look after her cat. After hanging up, I wondered why I said this. Crossed to the fridge and peered in at the expired tubs of Chinese food, at the net bag of lemon turning black. In the mornings, I'd go for a run, give up at some halfway point and buy a coffee, walk back with the sweat dry and cold on my arms. I was tired, sore-jawed, sore-boned in the evening. I wrote my grant applications, emailed clients, watched television, bought a cheap pair of boots online. Sometimes I imagined calling the center and didn't. Overall, I don't believe I looked as concerned as I could have done. This is not an attempt to sound callous. What you have to understand is that, so here it's speaking to us, readers, directly. What you have to understand is that, unpleasant or not, all of this had more or less happened before. Trawlers were often delayed and dives were often extended, in the same way that evening trains to the city were cancelled, by hail or by somebody caught on the tracks. It was all work, with all the usual delay and frustration. More than once, Leah had been held up without explanation, had warned I'd wound up home belated and weary and smelling of salt. Sometimes I think you prefer it down there, I had said to her, holding her face in my hands and wondering whether I meant it to sound like a joke or a reproach. You go so deep, you forget you're supposed to come back. I went to a party held by Leah's friends, Poppy from the long ago dinner party, gesturing in a manner I assumed to be self-deprecating around the generous loft apartment she shared with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend Dan. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure why I went. I had never much warmed to Poppy, so it seems like I've never seen that expression, that she didn't really got on with Poppy. Doesn't seem to like her much. So I had never much warmed to Poppy, to her aggressively changeable hairdo and her way of talking over the ends of other people's sentences, like the music that plays to keep acceptance speeches short. It's possible, I suppose, that the fact of 3 months without Leah was working on me harder than I wished to recognize. On occasion, I would crawl under my desk at noon and sleep through my lunch break. I felt more certain than usual that something was off about the color of my tongue. Company, in whatever form, suddenly seemed more appealing than it had done. Prior to leaving the house, I had smoothed my fingers across my eyebrows to flatten them and watch the rain of dead skin without some consternation. How long, I asked myself, had it been since I'd last washed my face? The music was loud, a blur of conversation between unfamiliar people and Sam somewhere at my side, poking my hip with a finger to make me move. In the kitchen, Poppy argued with Dan about something to do with the texture of the dip he was making. Sam found a bottle of wine, pinched 3 plastic cups from a sideboard, and poured one out of each of us, nestling her cup inside the empty third, which she was saving for whenever Toby arrived. I looked at her hands around the 2 cups and missed Leah hard and missed Leah hard. Missed the fact of saved space, of saving something in unison, of turning to one another afterwards as if to say, "Thank God it was you." I blinked, found that Sam was saying something to me. "You should drink that," she repeated. You look a little white." I said nothing to this. Imagine my mouth was filling with water. Wished I could escape to a bathroom and check on the color of my tongue. Sometime later, Leah's friend, Allegra, who had been at the first dinner party, came over to ask me how I was. She was wearing tennis shoes and a long white sweater, and I remember wanting to tell her I liked this outfit. And then, feeling certain she wouldn't care to know what I thought. She sat beside me on the windowsill and asked me how I was, which no one had exactly done up to this point. I told her it was difficult, and she nodded at me, tipped her plastic cup against mine. "I hear you." I remembered something that Carmen said before. "I hear you." Yeah. And I wondered idly why she and Leah had never dated. "You know, you can call me if you need to talk about anything," she said, "even if you just want to have a wine. It's really shitty, I know." I thanked her for this, feeling briefly warm in a way I would forget almost immediately afterwards. That's really nice of you, I said, and then, this wine is disgusting. When I got home, I found a message from the center on my answering machine, suggesting in a voice that seemed to glance at its watch that I try not to worry, that it was all going exactly to plan. I played the message over several times, imagining I heard another voice in the background, perhaps instructing the caller on what to say. Okay, I'm gonna have a little sip of water here. Okay, let's continue. I started losing time a little. The center still called, but a little less frequently. I thought about trying to find them several times around this point, searching futilely through their website for an address or any contact information besides their switchboard. Summer slunk into the brickwork, bloating the building outwards, pressure in the walls. The space above the oven swelled and leaked some vicious substance like a body pierced between its ribs. I began to grow delinquent with my emails, sleeping poorly and at badly chosen times of the day. Is this normal? Sam texted, and I had to think for longer than I cared to admit before. And I had to think for longer than I cared to admit before realizing that she made the lengths of that she meant. Before realizing she meant the length of Leah's absence. They say it's all standard, I replied. Did you know that submarines Did you know that submarines are able to produce their own indefinite supply of air? The only limitations are the amount of food on board and sustaining some sort of major technical defect. I had looked this information up online some moments earlier and hoped quite keenly that she didn't realize this. So I need a little right. Yeah. I found an online group for women who liked to roleplay that their husbands had gone to space. I'm not entirely sure how this came about, though I believe it was probably a byproduct of my fruitless search for a support group that really spoke to me. I spent several days moving through the message boards, reading conversations between women about their fantasy husbands, learning forum slang, not posting anything. MHIS, my husband in space, was a common acronym, as was BS before space, EB, Earthbound, and CBW came back wrong. MHIS was such a loving partner. A typical post might run, a friend and helpmeet, a wonderful father. But ever since he came back, things have been different. I wonder if he is CBW. Came back wrong. 6 years and counting on MHIS might run another. I know us EB wives, so earthbound wives, all have it tough, but sometimes I worry I don't have the natural reserves of patience it takes to make it. It can be very hard just to wait for the end of his MTM, Mission to Mars, without so much as a message to let me know he's safe. Most of the time, it's easy not to think about Most of the time, it's easiest to not to think about him at all. Beneath each post would run scores of comments, women fitting in with their own fictitious, fictitious, fictitious experiences of husbands lost to impossible missions, husbands orbiting the moons of Jupiter, husbands strewn across space. After a while, I started to wonder whether the thrill of the fantasy wasn't so much the thought of their husbands returning as the part where they wished them away. New here, I typed once. EB, looking to talk. I lingered over this message for several minutes, but ultimately chose not to post it, finding that none of the acronym fitted me well enough to bother. I imagined my mother's symptoms and read them into the way I swallowed, the way that I shipped my words. I fell prey to patterns of terrible thinking, imagined myself crowded with cysts, with cancer, growing an untreatable skin. I went to the doctor several times, detailing imaginary ailment, and was asked whether there was anything causing me anxiety. I've always been like this, I wanted to say. It's just that she made it better. The doctor explained that hypochondria's very insidiousness lay in its creeping logic, in the ways it purported to make sense. It's very easy to locate one symptom and then go in search of another, to knit them together in a way that will satisfy almost any diagnosis. If you're experiencing fatigue, vision problems, and tingling hands, the logical conclusion is multiple sclerosis. To a hypochondriac, any other interference smacks of a little but refusal to look at the facts. Try, the doctor said, to be a little less logical. Sometimes symptoms just happen. We don't really know why. The weather was changing, wet and bulbous and warm. Warm. One day, I sat in the window of the bedroom all afternoon and watched the flying ants foam the glass, collecting in the dip of the guttering and overflowing, falling to the gravel drive below. That night, around 10 or 11 o'clock, the phone rang, but the person on the line refused to speak when I answered. The number that flashed on the phone display looked to be that of the center, but no prompting would persuade the caller to speak. And after 4 minutes of silence, I once again heard the dial tone. After this, I sat on the floor of the kitchen and thought about Leah, about the shape of her feet, and the way she spoke about her father, the special voice she used to talk to cats, her kind phone, her intonation, her fingernails. I thought about the time we kissed at the movies and a guy jerked off behind us. And I complained to the management. I thought about fucking her on the floor, on the floor of her uncle's bathroom when we were staying over before a wedding. I thought about the way she often liked me to tell her what to do in bed. I thought about the day it first occurred to me that should she die, there would be no one in the world I truly loved. You can, I think, love someone a very long time before you realize this. Notice it in the way you note a facial flaw, a speech impediment, some imperfection which once recognized can never again be unseen. Are you just now realizing that people die? Leah had said to me when I voiced this thought, tucked up beside her on the sofa, with my knees pressed tight into the backs of hers. Not people, I had said, just you. At the start of the 4th month of Leah's absence, I witnessed a fracas on the message board, for wives of imaginary spacemen. One woman accused another of failing to treat a fantasy with due courtesy, and the thread quickly descended into a frenzy recrimination about how one wife's imaginary trauma stacked up against another's. MHIS has been gone for 7 years, one woman posted. MTP, mission to Pluto. No sign, no contact, nothing. Crew presumed dead, no hope of rescue. Think about that before you tell me my story is contrived. So everything in capital letters. I just think another woman posted in response that if you were really so caught up about your husband's absence, you wouldn't be posting details here the way you do. Check the community guidelines. A third woman, apparently fancying herself site cop, added to the discourse. Don't come for other people's stories. Offer the same respect you would expect. Have grace and space. She says there has been no contact, but she posted just last week about her husband sending her one last message while orbiting Pluto. A 4th inserted herself at this point. We're not saying it's a bad story. We're saying just try to be consistent. Those women really get into these imaginary stories of having this husband in the space mission. I read this thread in its entirety over the course of about an hour. Once it finished, I drank several glasses of wine in quick succession and typed in the comment box that Pluto was no longer a planet. Furthermore, I added, unaware I had clicked on all caps. If you people don't want your husbands, then why do you go to the trouble of making them up in the first place? Directly after posting this, I closed my laptop and dialed the number I had for the center. The call went straight to voicemail, so I left a message. I now remember very little about. I dreamt a lot during that time, and in uneasy colors, pale water leaking from the cupboard, the notches from an unfamiliar spine strewn cold across the windowsill. One night, I dream a congregation, 50 women in formal hats declaring themselves the acolytes of the Church of the Blessed Sacrament of Our Wives under the Sea. The church was tall. A plunging upward streak of ceiling that leered into the distant vaulted rafters, then fell beneath our feet to corresponding depths. I sat with legs curled up inside a pew and peered into the vast abyss, which should have been the floor, with almost movement, dark surge of something otherworldly. The woman who had once asked me about Flat, Stanley, stood up towards the altar, arms out, her hair flowing oddly upwards. The convocation raised their hands in imitation, and I looked towards the front, expecting a song, a benediction, a prayer to those long lost. The USS Johnston, said the woman at the altar, is the deepest shipwreck thus far located at over 20,000 feet. The known wreckage pieces consist of 2 turrets, a propeller shaft and propeller, 2 funnels, a mast, and several unidentified pieces of debris. At the point of sinking, only 141 of the vessel's 327 strong crew were saved. At least 90 managed to disembark the vessel before she sank, but were never seen again. There was a murmur in the congregation, a sound which I was slow to recognize as amen. In the 5th month, I began to assume she was dead, which made things both easier and harder. I felt nothing, and then utterly kneecapped by it, wanted so desperately to know what her last thought had been, and whether it had been about me. I called Sam crying, but when pressed at first, could only say that the cat I'd been looking after had died. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, the warm midnight weight of her voice, distant rustle of duvet covers. "You know, my mother used to tell me that cats know when it's time to go. We had one when I was little, and one day when she was about 16, we couldn't find her anywhere. Assumed she'd run off. Anyway, 2 days later, we found her all curled up in a box of picnic rugs in the shed at the bottom of the garden. She just knew it was time. She just knew it was time to take herself off, you know." In response to this, I kept on crying and told her I'd made it up, that I didn't know what I'd say, that I didn't know why I had said that thing about the cat. "I know that, sweetheart," she said to me. I had a feeling. Her voice was thick, but she kept talking. And I think I loved her for that. Leah, chapter now. I tell you something. For someone who likes the water, I've never been particularly keen on the dark. We sat together and stared at the torches, at the thin central reeds of the filaments which left white lines across the backs of my eyes. We submerged at noon, Jelka said at one point, gesturing to her wrist. But my watch is broken. It stopped on 2:45. It was hard to tell much in this regard by any normal method. None of us were very hungry or very thirsty or showing much of an impulse to sleep. I had no watch, and neither did Matteo, and without power, all the dials and meters and timepieces ranged around the main console were less than useless. Could have been days, Matteo said, and then shook his head in the manner of someone trying to get water out of his ears. But that's not really a helpful thing to say, is it? Is it strange? I asked. Is it strange? I asked, that we haven't seen anything yet? They looked at me and I gestured my head towards the window without moving my eyes from the lights. However long we've been here, I mean, and we haven't seen anything, and we haven't seen a thing. Matteo laughed, the sound metallic against the ceiling of the craft. Well, I don't know what you expected to see, buddy. Just staring at that torch for hours. I nodded, shrugged. That's fair enough, I guess, but you haven't seen anything either. Deep sea fish are not fish in a way that the average person would recognize. Having evolved to deal with the dark and the pressure. They sprout feelers from unfamiliar places, grow great gulping jaws that overspill the circumference of their bodies, produce their own creeping chemical light instead of relying on gas or buoyancy. Many deep sea species simply roll through the water like jelly, unencumbered by an inner or outer skeleton, their bodies made up of compound of such low density that the pressure of surrounding water possess no threat at all. Poses no threat at all. Some of my favorite deep fish are also some of the strangest looking. The frilled shark, generally considered a living fossil, with its 30-odd rows of needle-like teeth. The faceless cusk, which appears to have almost no features at all, which appears to have almost no features at all beyond two pairs of nostrils and a large and bulbous snout. Many deep sea creatures also have a tendency to gigantism, though this is not a topic on which so far there has been a great deal of study. Suffice it to say, there has been a noted tendency in crustaceans and cephalopods retrieved from the deep ocean to be of far greater than usual size. Those suggested explanation for this range from lower temperatures to food scarcity and are not generally agreed upon. All of which is a long-winded way of saying that the deep sea might be dark, but that doesn't make it uninhabited. It certainly was strange that however long it had been since we stopped sinking, we had not seen a single thing beyond the glass. Miri, new chapter of Miri. Oops, sorry, I'm gonna like this. Very good. Let's be serious, the therapist says. I don't think that either of you are listening hard enough. When she says this, she's talking about me. All right, I say, I'm listening, but this apparently demonstrates my tendency towards belligerence, and we have to start to exercise again. The therapy is free, bankrolled by the center on the understanding that further assistance will be forthcoming, although they are somewhat hazy on the details. This was the main thing I managed to sort. On finally getting through to someone on the phone, I tried to mention other things, tried to talk about obvious changes in Leah, tried to ask an explanation, but the voice on the line was implacable in the face of my questioning, assuring me several times that prolonged dives could throw up all kinds of issues that I shouldn't be too concerned. We call it the resurfacing glitch, the voice said, so cheerfully that I felt almost churlish for asking. It's so common, more common than you think. To begin, the therapist shows us a series of ink blot cards, and asks us to say what we see in each butterfly shape. Okay, so a couple of things are making sense here now. It seems like Miri, the calls that Miri was giving to the center was to ask for support from the center, ask support, mental support with therapist and making them aware that something was wrong with Leah. So it seems like finally she managed to got what she wanted, which is to get a therapist and have therapy sessions with Leah. So let's see. So ink blot card seems to be the, I don't know if you've seen in movies, but, you've got a card, a white card, and you have a splash of ink, and you have to say what it makes you think about. So that's the ink blot card. A genie, I said, an ice cream scoop was the Roche, I don't know, Rorschach test, Rockhart. I don't know how we pronounce this name. Rorschach test, not widely discredited around the mid-60s. An enchilada? What I see, Leah says, looking hard at each shape, is an eye, and an eye, and an eye, an eye, and an eye, and an eye. The therapist lays her cards face down on the coffee table and makes a series of notes in a ring-bound pad before asking me how I feel about my mother. When I say that I'm not quite sure how that could be relevant, she explains that she takes a deep listening approach to couples therapy, adding that childhood experience could often be a root of dysfunction in adult relationships. What we'll do here together, she says, is connect the dots. I'm apparently too given to the process of blame. I have allowed blame to settle over me like a weather system, swelling damp inside the curve of my forehead and setting my teeth electric. The therapist tells us to ask each other questions, insist that the silence between us can be broken by something as simple as one of us opening our mouth. I write my questions on index cards as though I am revising for a test, and then fold them away somewhere where Leah won't see. Why, I write, did you go if they told you to expect all this? What, I write, was so fascinating down there that you didn't come back? There is something, the therapist says, to be said for there is something, the therapist says, to be said for letting go of anger. There is something, I tell her in a voice she immediately turns unproductive, to be said for not staying away 6 months when your operation terms only stipulated 3 weeks. It was difficult in the morning before therapy to persuade Leah out of the house. She no longer enjoys the process of dressing, finds fabric painful next to her skin, and groans at the prospect of shoes, of walking, and coming home again. I find that a toenail has come clean off inside her walking boots, although she seems unaware of this and moves to sit on the sofa. Without quite knowing what I'm doing, I move over to the sink and spoon a small measure of table salt into a glass of water for Leah to drink. This passage, I don't know, I just have a flash here. I don't know how you feel about this passage. And it feels to me like Leah has become a fish. I don't know if it's it's my imagination that went too wild. But tell me what you think about this passage. But it feels very much, and it all makes sense that, she's only drinking water with salt. The fact that she can't wear shoes, um, and get dressed like normal, ordinary people. It really feels like she's become a fish or a marine creature. I don't know. Okay. And the fact that she doesn't feel comfortable with the sensation of having clothes, the fabric on her skin is not comfortable for her. I'm uncertain of the time and therefore uncertain of whether or not it's entirely appropriate for Sam to be here. She's been knocking for several minutes, apparently, and the neighbors had to let her into the buildings. But there is no sign of them now, and their television just switched from a soap opera to the news. I just wanted to see if there was anything I could do. She's brought food for some reason, wrapped a chicken in tinfoil, producing it from the depth of her bag with an awkward expression. This looks less strange in my head, she says. I just thought it might be nice. It's a bad day. Leah dragged herself about the flat, like a grappling hook, catching on the furniture. I think I take the chicken and ask whether there's any chance of a rain check. She's a bit under the weather, I say, like some smiling kidnapper of an horror movie, chatting benignly to the mailman. I don't want to make anything worse. I read about this thing, Sam says. Decompression sickness? I say I read about I say I read about it. I mean, I Googled it, which I guess is reading. It affects scuba divers, pilots, astronauts, anyone who works in compressed air. Apparently, nitrogen bubbles form in the blood and the tissues and things when the pressure decreases. When they come up, I mean from underwater, it causes dizziness, apparently rashes, fatigue, amnesia, even personality changes. Bad stuff. I don't know why I'm telling you this, really. I just thought you've been saying she's not well. She's been having trouble adjusting. And I just wondered whether it was something that someone could help with. I mean, not that you wouldn't have thought of that, if it was that. Obviously, I'm not trying to diagnose. It's just you haven't told me much, and I thought it would be nice to check, or not nice, but helpful. The chicken is hot to the tinfoil, and I considered dropping it. Consider telling her to fuck off. Consider telling her to come in and deal with whatever it is I'm failing to deal with. I'm sorry, she says, when I don't see anything. I really am the biggest dick on the planet. We both look at the chicken between us. Juice trickling out of a gap in the tinfoil into the floor. Much later, she's left, and I've gone back to doing nothing very much from the region of the sofa. She texts me. I'm sorry, she says. I shouldn't have brought you a fucking chicken. I should have brought you a coffee and asked you if you wanted to talk. I don't think this is okay, I say on my own in the bathroom, to nobody. I'm scouring around the edge of the bath with the sponge and the scream that comes away with each stroke is pinkish. With each stroke is pinkish, less granular than it has been in previous weeks, as though something about it is growing thicker. I try not to get it on my fingers. I'm uncertain of whether or not this matter has any correlation to Leah, to the size or to the shape of her, like a layer removed. She has taken like a layer removed. She has taken to wearing a large floor-length toweling dressing gown around the flat, and it's hard to get a clear idea of how she looks underneath it, whether this is a shedding or a breaking down. Look at this, I want to say. Imagine holding the sponge to her face and asking for an explanation. I imagine asking her to tell me what the problem is. I imagine asking for a hug. My Leah wouldn't be like this, I want to tell her. She wouldn't be so silent. She wouldn't leave an inch of herself behind whenever she took a bath. It is still comforting of a fashion to think about my Leah, though such thoughts come attendant on the usual wave of grief that my Leah is not who I have with me now. My Leah was funny and strange and predominantly wore men's underwear. My Leah chewed hangnails loudly and knew the name of every actor yet never remembered. The words to a song. My Leah took me out to the beach near the nuclear power station, what she used to go walking with her father. Our fog in January, too cold and too early for anyone to be there but us. I took my shoes and socks off and cut my feet to pieces on oyster shells, trying to show willing as I ran down to the water. It was that morning that we saw the sea lion, a squint of ice in my throat, like a splinter, like something come loose from the air and lodged in my flesh. I have always thought the edge of the water is somehow particularly cold, a strange, almost place that seems perceptible to deep in temperature. It is something Leah has always put down to the shifting of the air between two elements, the chilly liminality of water and earth, standing at the place where one fades into the other. I've always been sure that I feel it, the sudden confusion, the air drawing taut between one stage and another, looking out across the water and feeling my feet connected to something more solid than the plunging uncertainty beyond. I've always felt weighted, literal, a tangible creature connected to the earth. The only time I felt something very different to this was when we saw the sea lion. It was a term Leah taught me. That day, in fact, grasped my hand and kissed it and told me that sea lion was an ancient term once used by sailors to describe the flow of ice that forms on the surface of the ocean when the air changes temperature rapidly enough to freeze water thrown to the surface in choppy weather. The effect created is that of a sort of floating platform, a spread of barely solid water, like a vast and drifting jellyfish that sailors once took to be some organ of the sea's internal structure, come loose and straining skywards. I still remember it. A drifting anomaly of matter, solid and yet not quite so, spread out beyond the doom bar. I remember the sensation of my feet on solid ground and my hand in Leah's solid grasp, and the disconcerting sight of something almost solid further out. It seemed from a distance to be something one could conceivably walk on. Though, of course, in reality, if you set foot on it, it would immediately give way to the water beneath. I turned to Leah and felt an odd sort of relief, despite her hand round mine, to find her still with me, to find she had not moved further up the beach to search for cowrie shells and left me teetering in this uncertain place. The sea lung moved very slightly, leading me to feel that the ground I stood on might be moving too, might be less solid than I assumed. I pressed my free hand to my chest and wondered how solid that could really be, how tangible anything about me might really be. Standing on the edge, I could feel it, the chill of the air, aching to become something else. Right. Keti is saying, I think also about that. She's becoming a fish. Yes, you too feel the same. That's quite, it's, we'll see. Maybe there is something in that sort of feeling. Maybe we'll see. And here, this scene on the shore, on the beach, with the understanding of the sea land is also a metaphor for the fact that nothing is granted. Nothing is you can't take anything for granted. That as much as you would think that something is graved in stone, or you assume that something is for life or forever, then this sea lung metaphor shows that actually nothing is certain in life, and that her relationship here with and reflecting on this moment with Leah on the beach shows that Miri's relationship with Leah might not be something that will be forever. I feel that, I don't know how you imagining the rest of the novel, and it's what I like to do sometimes with my members in the book club, the in-person book club, because they read the book on their own, and I'm asking them, oh, what kind of, and I think I might have asked you, I think in one of our live workshop, is what kind of what do you imagine is going to happen in the rest of the novel? What do you imagine the end of the novel is going to be? And I don't know if you feel the same, but it seems like something has been broken, or I don't know. This in this relationship with between Leah and Miri, that's it will never gonna be. It will never be the same after this experience. After this trauma of Leah not being herself anymore, and it feels like she's not the woman. She's not anymore the woman. She's not the woman she used to be. She's not the woman Miri fell in love or used to love. It feels very much that they might I don't know, separate or something. That this relationship is not gonna carry on, or yeah, it feels like something is of this order is gonna happen in this relationship in the way, I don't know, it's turning. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. Tell me what you think. Leave a comment in below this video. See how you so that I can read what you feel about the next chapters, and yeah, what's coming next with the novel. Right, that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this live reading. Make sure you subscribe to the book club to join our live workshop this Saturday. And also remember, you can purchase the live workshop of Daisy Jones and the Six on my website store. And I wish you a beautiful end of the day. And I can't wait to read your messages, and don't hesitate to comment below the video. And I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 Central European Time, Paris time, live on Instagram. And we will read pages 101 to 134. So quite a long session as well, a little bit similar to today. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.